I'm originally from Chicago. Went to school at Western Michigan University, so went to 4 years, and got drafted in 2005 by the Red Legs, the Cincinnati Reds. And this is just a little timeline of the places, my stops in the big league. So Cincinnati, got to play in Oakland, the Texas Rangers, San Diego Padres, Arizona Diamondbacks, and then my last game in the big leagues was with the Cleveland Indians. And so just, I want to express to you guys how important these goals are to me. So my first is the most important, and it's to build confidence in you as coaches and as parents so that you guys can continue to build confidence in your own players. So that's number one. And then number two is how do I want to do that? So I want to provide clear information, and I want to ask you guys questions and you guys to ask me questions so we can all increase our baseball knowledge together. And then why? For me, I'm really passionate about getting players to play college baseball someday. And just to express to you guys that that was the bridge from playing high school to get into pro ball. That's how I bridged the gap, was having an opportunity. I played there for 4 years. I never got drafted as a high school player. I never got drafted my junior year. But finally, my senior year, one last hope, I got drafted. And then once I got to put on that professional uniform, I was not letting go. So, but that's the biggest thing, getting players into college, helping you guys, and being a resource to everybody. So again, this is the hitting course, right? What I really cover. So if you guys want to go check it out, those are all free videos, whatever. And then phase 1, phase 2 is what we kind of are going to cover. And then 4 core values of hitting: rhythm and timing. And tonight, weight transfer, connection, and finish, right? All right, Justin is a huge advocate of the mental side of the game. And I am so glad he brought that up the first session, because the mental side of the game has not even been tapped into yet, I don't believe, for young players. Like I've said it before, like I really started getting into the mental side of baseball when I was probably late high school, college for sure. But it's so important. And today we're just going to talk about self-talk. And we talked about that last week, the self-talk. Remember when I told you I hit the walk-off homer? It was actually here in San Diego. And I kept telling myself, just enjoy this. Just enjoy this. And I swung through the first 2 pitches, strike 1, strike 2. But I still kept telling myself, just enjoy this. And I think that's how you deal with pressure, right? Is with positive self-talk. It's so important. So one of my favorite coaches was my freshman high school baseball coach, Coach Bo Prey. And he gave me the 3 C's. He said, you will always remember these 3 C's: confidence, courage, and concentration. When you're preparing in the off season, when you're in the batter's box, repeat this in your mind: confidence, courage, concentration. And I'm telling the truth here. Like, that stuck with me from high school baseball to my last day playing in the big leagues. That's the self-talk I would have because of the influence of my high school baseball coach. And then I put the quote from Charles Barkley from a book that I really enjoy. They interviewed him, and Charles Barkley says, pressure is what you put in tires, right? Like that's like, okay, as baseball players, we're gonna have to trick ourselves sometimes, right? You're gonna have to, like, especially, I mean, in college, they'll start interviewing you whether you had a good game or a bad game, and then it gets harder in professional ball. And you have all these questions, even like talking to family and friends about how you're hitting right now, or old coaches, like, how come you're not doing this or that? You got to find a way to filter that out, kind of trick yourself to trust yourself. And then I'm going to share, this is a must-read book, like for your players, for yourself, for both on and off the field. But Gary Mack, the author of Mind Gym. And this is the quote: learn to view pressure as a challenge to meet rather than a threat of defeat. And this is what so there's only 2 walk-off homers I've ever hit in my life. One was in the one I told you guys about in San Diego. The other one was at Western Michigan. And when I was on deck, this is the exact quote, because I was so into this book, Mind Gym. I read it like 4 times, but I was on deck at Western Michigan against Northern Illinois, and I kept repeating. I just said, pressure is a challenge to meet, not a threat of defeat. Pressure is a challenge to meet, not a threat of defeat. And I went up there just weightless, and the self-talk took that pressure off of me. And like I said before, like, why don't I use it more often? Because it's like a muscle. You got to train this. You have to train the self-talk before the game even happens, before the season even happens. So that's what I wanted to hit on today with self-talk and how important that is to combat pressure.
No, like you said, I love this so much. We can teach all the fundamentals we want to our kids, and I think they know it pretty well by the time they get in high school. But this is what I see is missing. Right. I see the mental aspect of the game, the confidence, the spiral. You know, if they go 0 for 4 one game, how do I rebound from that? I think all of this that we're talking about right now is just so valuable as a coach to be able to share this with the players on how to do that. And I love listening to you talk about it.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thanks, Justin. And I know we haven't tapped into it. I feel like there's so much to teach these young players and to appreciate that. But here's unless anybody else has a comment or a question, but.
Hey, Adam?
Yeah.
When I was in college as a freshman, and we led the country for most of the year in home runs. And I hit in the 5-hole. I didn't contribute too much to it, but the 4-hole hitter, one day we're standing there and I'm behind him and he's standing motionless with his eyes closed. And he's on deck. And I'm watching him. I'm like, this is weird. I've never seen anybody. He looks like a statue. So I walk up to him, I tap him on the shoulder and I said, you okay? He looks over at me and goes, yeah, I'm great. I just hit a home run. I go, what do you mean? He goes, haven't you ever heard of visualization?
That's right.
And I go, no, I'm from Central Pennsylvania. We've never heard of that. And I kid you not, the guy goes up. His name's Tim Smith. You might even know him. He was with the Marlins for a long time. Anyway, he goes up, hits a home run, comes around third. I'm coming up to the plate. He goes, told you.
That's amazing. That's a great story. Love
it. Tim Smith. Yep.
That is amazing. Because I said the same in the last episode. I think we talked about when it starts. It starts before the game starts, but it starts in the dugout. And then you go on deck. But when you're on deck, you're visualizing. You're taking an at bat before you're actually in there. Yeah. So instead of having 4 at bats a night, I challenged myself to have 8 at bats. Mm-hmm. So yeah. That's an awesome story. Thank you, Mark.
I'll never forget that.
I wouldn't either. I'm not going to forget. After you telling that story, I'm not going to forget it. Yeah, thank you. So we're going to move on. So this is the book right here. And if you guys can get it, I highly recommend it. I went and spoke at Western Michigan a couple years ago for their leadoff dinner. And I got every one of the players a book. And I wrote like a little personal message in each one because that's where it started. Was at Western Michigan. I started reading this book. Actually, the punter on the team of the football team, I had like a class with him, and he introduced this book to me, and I refer to it still today. I'm just gonna. It's all positive stuff in there. So, all right. So weight transfer. Let's see if I think I have. So these are the 4 core concepts of this core value of weight transfer: backside load, linear weight transfer, rotational weight transfer, and a firm front side. So I'm thinking to myself, what is weight transfer? And to define it as we get later on in this webinar, weight transfer is the amount of force a hitter creates. All right. So I want you guys to remember that amount of force a hitter creates through weight transfer. All right. So the backside load, you can see here, I go 60-40, right? I mean, that's kind of like, I say, we talked about stance and load last week. I mean, that's just the baseline, right? 60-40. You see some guys, you look at Bagwell's or like a Council who got different stance or probably has more weight on their backside, or it might be 50-50, right? But I like, for me personally, like 60-40, and that's the GRF is ground reaction force, right? You're using the ground to plant yourself. It's so important. And obviously the yellow arrows down, whatever you put into the ground's going to deliver the same back up into your body, right? And you're just creating that backside load. And you want pressure on your pressure, and not talking about different kind of pressure. It's that you want pressure. You want to feel a stretch on on your back hip and on the inner part of your thigh. So that's where you want to feel. Right where this line is on Jeter's, the yellow line right there, and on his back hip is where you want to feel the backside load. When you feel it in your knee, it's no good. It's going to slow a lot of stuff down. Backside load. And then you want to activate your scapula, like the back of your back here. You want to be relaxed, but you want to have that engaged still, right? I mean, if that's just keeping your elbow up, whatever you want to do, like you can see Jeter's elbows up. I mean, a lot of people, I'm sure some coaches are okay with having an elbow down, but for me personally, I like the elbow up because it activates that scap. It's another anchor. It's just another anchor, just like your hip is, right? So that's backside load, okay? And I'm gonna move kind of a little bit faster because I feel like we have a lot of material, and I know I always want to leave questions for the end, or I want to have some time left for questions at the end. So linear weight transfer, right? We touched on it, but basically another way to say linear weight transfer, I'd say back hip trigger, right? So hips going, knees driving, right? Back knee drive, but everything, his torso, his shoulders, and his back haven't moved yet, right? So this is so important. This creates that torque, right? And that stretch. I said it before in the first couple sessions, but it's like when a pitcher or a thrower or infielder, position player lays his arm back, right? You can't see it happening because it happens so quick. And same thing with this linear weight transfer move. It's just quick, but it's so important because it's creating that separation. And you just make sure you keep the upper body still, right? It stays quiet. Lower half is triggering, upper body staying still. So we're moving on. Rotational weight transfer. So we got backside load, linear weight transfer, rotational weight transfer now. You want it to be around your spine, right? And in order to do that, you have to maintain posture, right? You see kids hunching over or too upright, they're not going to rotate around their spine, right? You can see how stacked Pujols is right here. You got to maintain posture. And you draw all the power from your lower half, right? And then the firm front side, this is the fourth concept of the core value of weight transfer, right? So you can see this, right? We had on his backside for the backside load, but now look at that firm front side, right? He's driving all that energy into the ground, and that ground is just, boom, giving it right back to him. And that's just going to cause so many great things. The bat speed, it's going to prevent drifting, lunging, all this stuff. And it's going to let you really create that rotational acceleration, which allows you to wait a little bit longer on the ball, recognize the pitch more. There's a lot of great things about all these core concepts of weight transfer. So I went through that quick. It's a lot of information. And basically just scratching the surface. That's what you want everybody to understand. This is just basic stuff. You know, those 4 core concepts. Does anybody want to have anything to add or have any questions? I'm just going to give wait a minute or just to see if anybody wants to say anything.
Adam, I do real quick.
Yeah.
I see these two examples of Harper and Trout. Who would you want to emulate, or who would you teach right now in the game? The swing that most, like the perfect swing. I know there's not perfect, but who would you show kids like this is the swing you want to model after?
Both the same. There's not one. They're both unbelievable hitters. Like that's the top. It doesn't get any better than that.
Okay,
Like
so these two players right here would be ones that you would example after?
100%.
Okay.
Yeah. They have different techniques or different ways about getting to the baseball, but they all follow the same core concepts of weight transfer, right? And we'll touch on a little bit later, but both of them are. I mean, the only thing I might do to make it specific is lefty righty, right?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
That, I mean, that's more advanced, though, I feel like. But nowadays you can always mirror. You can flip it, right, with different technology. But both of them, that's why they're successful, because they follow all these core concepts to a T. You know.
Adam,
Or you could just go ahead, Mark.
I noticed both their front foots are closed.
Yeah.
Is that always the case, or are there sometimes those guys are opening their front foot, or is that bad?
There's sometimes they're open.
Okay.
There's definitely sometimes they're open, but I would say they practice this.
Yeah.
Right? I would say they practice this way. But yeah, they probably have a tendency, whether it's a slider low and away, and they kind of like lose their firm front side, or they get beat on a fastball so that to create space.
Right.
There's a lot of reasons why their front foot might open.
Okay.
Or they're not feeling good that day. They might have an ailment, like we never know.
Right.
But this is what's that, Mark?
I said this is the preferred close front. Yeah.
It's
what
what
we're trying to
do. Young hitters.
Yeah. Okay.
So just to be so we're all on the same page, we all can understand what we're working on.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that's right. It's the foundation.
Adam, one last thing. I noticed in that last slide with Harper, his back knee drive into the ground, his back foot hadn't rotated yet. When in the process does that really happen? Right here, it looks like he's driving everything forward, but that back foot hasn't rotated.
You know what? That's a great question. It's gonna, and that's what I mean. I think it will happen. You can see sometimes his foot comes off the ground.
Yeah.
Bryce Harper's like a Frank Thomas, right?
Yeah.
But at this position, it's like the same thing as this. Like the pitcher's arm laying back. It's happening so quick.
Okay.
That's gonna bust through.
Okay.
It's gonna come through, but that's a mechanism probably for him. Whether it's a braking device for him, that could be the way he stops his swing by not rotating.
Sure.
Or it just keeps him grounded. He's using that ground reaction force still. Could be another. But like Will Myers. Will Myers hardly rotates his back foot.
Hardly ever, yeah.
And that guy's got so much power.
Yep.
And there's going to be outliers like that. And I'm fine with it.
Okay.
But at a young age, I'm not okay with I'm not okay with that. At a young age, I want to see him drive his back knee. And if he's not rotating his back foot, I'm going to do the drop knee drill with him.
Yeah.
To make sure he's getting that linear weight transfer.
Okay.
Right.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So these are the comparisons, right? We'll do a couple of comparisons. You can see this is over exaggerating the drift, right? But you can see the difference between drifting versus staying back. And the one thing that I really wanted to point out is how much space between his head and, I mean, where the point of contact is going to be, right? The guy on the left, there's no space between his head and the baseball is going to be right where his knee is almost, right? So there's no space. But look at Bryce Harper. There's space there. It's little space, right? It's little space, but that's the biggest difference. It's creating space between your body and the baseball, right? So that's what drifting versus staying back. You stay back, you create space. You give yourself more time. You allow that ground reaction force to work. That energy that you create, right, from weight transfer. All right, we'll move on to the next comparison. Collapsing versus keeping a firm front side. Right, you can see the difference. I mean, it's evidential. Again, creating that space, right? Where he's trying to create space, and he's pushing his hands out in front on the left side, the guy on the left. Right, he's trying to create space, but really the space between his head and his front foot is what kind of defines this. You know, you see Pujols with his head, and look how much space between his head and his front foot. Therefore, he can get to that point of contact. He can use all that energy that he created from weight transfer and just pop to the ball. This guy over here is in trouble. That's what he is. There's base hits there, though. Don't get me wrong. There's base hits doing that. You better be fast, though, or you better have some kind of
guy on the left looks like he's going trying to hit a slider in the dirt right there.
From Mitch Talbot.
Yeah.
That's Mitch Talbot slider right there. that's how I look when I face Mitch. So that's it right there. So that's the two comparisons, just to kind of give you guys a better visual, right? So this brings us to like the modern day kinematic sequence, right? To help you guys understand this, I kind of broke this down a little bit because I mentioned it in like the first episode, and I'm not sure who grasped onto it and who didn't. But so let me just take this slow. The red is the hip. You guys see that? Mm-hmm. The red indicates your hip's going. So that's the how fast is to get your hips going to accelerate, right? Boom, that's the red line. It only can go so fast, right? And then your torso is the green, right? Torso goes. It starts after the red, right? So here's the red, the box. So we saw in the first picture up there, right? The hips go, that's the knee drive. Linear weight transfer. Boom, went. Now the green. This starts the rotational weight transfer, but you got to make sure that your torso is going and your shoulders still staying back. And this is all happening really quick. This is, you're not thinking about this at all in the box, right? This is all trained. You've been trained. So that's the green line, right? Your torso is gone. Now the blue line, right? The blue box, his shoulder is going. Finally, his hands are releasing, and they are flying, right? Because he's followed this kinematic sequence. This is it. If you took Bryce Harper, you put the K-vest on Bryce Harper, you probably get the same thing right here. And that's just perfect, right? And see, Justin, going back to your point, right? His back foot came off the ground. And that happened in a split second. But that's the kinematic sequence that we need to watch for our players.
That is awesome.
You got to have them doing the right drills and put them in the right situations, put them in the right controlled environment, right? So that they can build a confidence. It's going to be tough without K-Vest to see what kind of kinematic sequence, because they did my On Base University came in, and I got certified by them. And my torso and my shoulders were going together, which means that the green line and the blue line were on top of each other. There was no separation between the two, if you guys can see that. So they were on top of each other. That's no good. And we did the test on me because they do screenings, which I started doing for a couple of kids already. They did a screen like this. You hold the bat, and you can't break the plane of glass, right? You got to go straight back this way. I can't do it. I got to go out. I got to break the plane of glass. It should be like this, right? But my shoulder's so tight. I'm like, I should have really hit that like hard, like got a physical therapist and really hit that hard to loosen this up. So maybe that would have created more separation, would have given myself more time to recognize the pitch. That was my nemesis. That's what got me in trouble. Was I swung at bad pitches, as Mitch knows. But That's the kinematic sequence, just in like kind of nutshell still. There's a lot that goes into this. Don't get me wrong. I'm still learning. Before we move on, I know that's a lot to digest, especially for like Tristan. I know, I believe he's younger. Eugenio, you have a player that's younger too. So this stuff, like maybe by time, maybe like 12 years old, they might be doing like, I don't know, in 5 years, might be starting at 6. But this is more for a little bit older player, I would say, like 12, going into high school just to get their measurement. And again, going back to On Base University, if you guys have a chance, they really do a good job. So I'm just going to show you guys again, trigger the backside, just on a bigger scale. You can guys see the bigger picture. Trigger the backside, trigger the torso, trigger shoulder, and then boom, the hands are just going to fly. And I coach a lot of kids, and I ask them after I give them a drill to do, or whatever, a little cue that sticks with them. I say, what did you feel there? And they said, effortless. That's what all of them. And the different states I go to, they all say effortless. They felt like it was easy to swing. You try to create too much of that because you're trying to swing with your upper body. You're trying to swing with your torso and your shoulders when you really need to activate your hips. It's effortless. And you can turn around velocity a lot easier, So that's weight transfer phase 1. Okay, so this is part of the online course. This is one video. This is a good drill that I like doing with young players that they don't even think about the kinematic sequence, but they have to do it. Doing this drill, you have to do it in order to do this drill right. So here you go. Rapid fire drill helps you explode your hips into weight transfer. Start by standing about 60 feet away from the back net of the cage. If you're outside, stand 60 feet away from a fence or the backstop. The coach will underhand side toss 5 balls in a row, giving you just enough time to reset in between each toss. The point of the game is to hit 5 baseballs in a row off the back net. Clear your mind of any mechanics and just enjoy this challenge. Can you hit 5 consecutive line drives off the back net? So the assignment, hit 5 balls off the back net. I'm sure some coaches out here have done that drill before, right? Just a rapid fire drill to get them going, thinking about what they're doing.
Adam, on that drill.
What?
On that drill, I noticed you were actually lifting and loading and then like striding, but
Nice.
Bruggy, I noticed wasn't. Is there a preference on that?
No, there's not.
Okay.
As long as, and there's not, as long as they're doing it quick, they're resetting after they swing, they reset. And if the coach is going a little bit too fast, you can tell them to slow it down, but don't give them too much time in between to think about anything. Right?
Adam, can you hear me?
Yeah, Brett. Hey, how are you, man?
Hey, good. How are you?
Good.
Sorry, a little late to the game, but just catching up and just looking at the things you guys were just talking about on the result of being effortless or feeling, that easy swing, but generating more power and speed. How much do you get into when you're doing, that kinetic chain is creating like it's creating that load, and we've just done a lot of talk when we teach our boys about torque versus speed. And when like your speeds are high, your torque needs to be low, meaning like when your speeds are low, your torque needs to be high, meaning like your stride, that's a slow movement. It's creating that torque so that when you release it, you want to release the energy through the bat and not be strong with it. And we've just done a lot of that kind of.
How do you do that?
Well, so if you kind of think of it as like the difference, like it's kind of a lame example, but it doesn't really have anything to do with the swing. But like when you're pulling a boat, a tube behind a boat, and you want it, you're going fast, that swing, that tube's moving really fast, but you don't really get that crazy release of the tube till you crank one and turn it. And you don't even have to be at high speed, right? You're slow, but you can, when you get that crank and you kind of load that tube up, and then as you release that, they go flying and like double, triple the speed that they were going before. And so it's kind of that same energy where when you were talking about a linear load or a linear stride and then the rotation, when you get that separation, that creates that torque.
Right.
So you can feel that torque. But if we release it with speed, and the speed accelerates through, with torque, and our torque, so well, we call it like a strong swing. So you're coming through strong, because I can go up and swing super fast,
right,
and be all over the world,
yeah,
with torque and like strength behind it. But it's not going to be a good swing. I'm going to actually lose accuracy with the head of the bat.
right.
The bat's going to go all over the place. But so with that kinetic strength, that kinetic sequence, if it's done right, that's why you can get little guys that can pop the ball, right? Because they can get, when they get in line and they get that torque behind it, then they release the torque. Because once you release that torque, you want to leave the torque. You don't want to have fast, hard torque through. You want to have that effortless swing, that easy swing,
That's
but it has
exactly
all
right.
the pop.
That's exactly right. I love that you teach that. It's really good. And for me, when I see a kid trying to create that speed, trying to make the boat go faster than it has to go, I'm like, let's do the build-up drill, right? Whenever I see the players, like any kind of tension in their face at all, I'm like, let's start at 20%.
Right.
For 3 swings, 40% for 3, 60, 80, and then let it eat. Let it eat at 100.
Right.
And by the time I think we're saying the same thing, right?
And I think it's one of the things that this is just something that over my career of playing and coaching and whatever, I've just kind of come up with analogies that way, just to help kids understand, like, dude, I can go 40 on a boat and you're going to go 40, but as soon as I crank to the side, you're going to go 80, and so if we can go linear and get that loaded, so they just can understand that, because I can crank it and they'll feel like they're going fast.
Right.
Same thing with a swing. You can get that speed up on your swing, but if you're not releasing that kinetic chain through the ball, is that a good analogy through the teach?
Great analogy. I love it, man. No. So, and I think a lot of players need those analogies. They need an image, right? I think a lot of us are visual learners, a lot of feel learners, but I think kids really need to see it.
Right.
Like they want to see like an image. That's what I always did. Like whenever I visualized, we talked about the mental side of the game earlier, Brett, and like the visualization is so important. And then just give them an image that they can grasp onto and adhere to. And so it could take them a long way.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot to be like that I can say. I have a harder time drilling that and teaching it, teaching the 2-step, as far as like, especially with younger kids, getting that linear line before the rotational to build up that torque, right? Like, to get that separation. It's called separation too, but like the scap load or whatever, like to get that, so we're not getting too linear and we're not getting too rotational. Right. So you got to have that right line where you got, that barrel gets released with all the kinetic energy behind it, so that you're driving the ball, not just hitting the ball.
That's right. Yeah. You want to accelerate through the baseball, not just slap at it.
Right. So what have you seen worked with, like, with your kids that you've taught, that to be able to keep that power behind it?
So because we follow the 4 core values, right? We have the rhythm and timing, weight transfer, connection, finish. But for the weight transfer, we always make sure that they have a wedge in their back, at least for most of the drills at the camps that we do. We have a wedge, like a yoga wedge.
Right.
And we put their back foot on it. So it's already, their knee's already driven. which
Right.
prevents that sway in rhythm and timing. A lot of kids try to sway in their rhythm and timing, so their knee goes outside.
Right.
Right, so they want to have that. So the wedge kind of really enforces the knee drive, like the preset knee drive almost.
Right.
And then on top of that, on top of the weight transfer, having them drop their back knee, like I call it the Adrian Beltre drill. Right, you
Right.
remember Adrian was a game
Oh, yeah.
5
Mhm.
against the
The
Cardinals.
home run off his back knee.
Yeah, I mean it's an off-speed pitch.
Yeah.
But he still dropped down to his back knee and he held it because
Right.
he was driving through the ground. He was transferring his weight linearly, which allowed him to rotate, keep his posture, maintain his posture, and just crank rotational weight transfer. That's what I do. The wedge and drop the knee drill. I mean, I don't get to work with kids too often. I'm kind of in, out,
Right.
and just kind of like building relationships out here, but
Camp situations.
camp, yeah, and that's what I'm trying to find a way, like doing this stuff, the webinar of the online hitting course, to do the follow-up for these players and their parents. Like, I feel like I know parents want it right away, the answers, but like,
Yeah.
you gotta put some time, but it's simple stuff. I'm telling you, it's simple if you could just go through it,
Yeah.
Take the
I
time.
think. Oh, go ahead.
No, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just. I mean, people just learn so differently. Like I honestly, through my career, like I learned how to hit with power actually by playing high school golf. Like I know that a lot of people say golf and baseball are so different, but I learned how to be on a kinetic chain through golf and how to build that torque up and then release it through the ball. And it really, I mean, there's so many sports that you can look at outside of even swinging sports, like a javelin thrower or like a figure skater or whatever, where they generate so much speed through torque and through that kinetic chain that if you can somehow harness that and teach the kids to realize that, like, there's, to get that chain to work, like, I don't know, there's so many different ways that
well, that's
kids
what
learn.
we always encourage kids to play other sports. That's
Right.
the thing, man. Like, go try all these different sports because you're gonna develop your athleticism.
Yeah.
You're gonna understand it, or it's gonna give you a better visual. That's why I mean.
Right. Yeah. Oh, my whole swing changed when I learned how to hit a golf ball.
Yeah.
Which is crazy because most people are like, dude, it'll destroy your swing. But
My baseball swings destroys my golf swing. That's what happens.
yeah, that's true. That's true. But I mean, there's just things you can take, right?
Yeah.
So.
No, it's cool. I appreciate your input, man. It's good stuff. It's really good stuff. I'm gonna keep on flowing along. We're gonna go. That's the hitting course. If you guys are interested, or if you know anybody that's interested, other parents that you feel like might need this for your teams. So right off the bat, $100 off, and you can win a lot of different incentives too, like give away lizard skin batting gloves. If you finish the course, basically, just free pair of batting gloves. I'll send them to you, and then the lizard skin grips. There's a couple challenges. Like I think the rapid fire drill might be a challenge to do. They do it. They send the video or upload it on Instagram. Send them lizard skin bat or lizard skin grip. Stuff like that. Trying to keep the kids like involved. Trying to get the parents involved, like but get them learning about this stuff. And then, all right, so I guess that's it. I thought I had a little bit more, but it's whatever you guys want to talk about. If you guys have any other questions, doesn't have to be weight transfer. Just I'm all ears.
Adam,
Yeah.
Mark,
hey.
One of the things I've always been kind of fascinated with is that you could take major league hitting instructors. In fact, I saw a video of this where they sat in a room and talked and they couldn't agree on everything. So as you as a player came up through, you had to have a lot of coaches in your head, in your ear about a lot of different ways of doing things. So, and that's something these kids coming through the process, there's so much information.
That's right.
And yet, if you take the people at the top of the food chain, you would think they would all say, yep, this is how we do it. But even, I mean, maybe some concepts are universal, but there's a lot that aren't. So what are your thoughts on kids coming through, hearing a lot of different things from a lot of different people?
So for me as a coach now, the most important thing to do for a player, because it was the most important thing for me, is to listen to the player.
Mm-hmm.
Give him a chance before you try to bestow any knowledge upon him, before you try to, deliver the next greatest thing about hitting because you think it's right for him. Before you do any of that, you need to listen to what he's saying because he's going to tell you a lot. They're a lot smarter than we think. It's amazing what these 10-year-olds are telling me. Yeah, like 10, 12-year-olds, like I talk to them. What are you working on, first of all? And what do you think, how do you want to fix that? Like get them talking is the most important thing. Because that's the best hitting coach. Those are the best hitting coaches I've ever had. With that said, you still have to have your philosophy, right? But it's also the kid's responsibility to filter out. They have to be coachable. If they're not coachable, they're out, right? You're red flagged right away. If you don't try it, at least once you're out. Like there's no, well, at least the higher level, they're not going to stand for that. You got to at least put forth an effort. I had a great hitting coach. My first professional hitting coach was Jimmy Hickman. Not sure if you guys know Jimmy Hickman. Old time, played for the Cubs, old timer. And he saw us struggling in rookie ball. I'm in Billings, Montana, and he sees that I'm like really trying to create something. And I'm listening to this coach and that coach, and the hitting coordinator comes in and tells me something, and he can see that my wheels are spinning, and I'm trying to please everybody. So he pulls me aside and he points to my head. He says, "You know what that is?" And I gave him some kind of rookie ball answer, but he's like, "That's your filter. You're going to have to filter a lot of stuff." And that's what I feel like that's what made me successful. I was able to filter stuff out, but I was coachable. I would try at least one time, whatever a coach told me. But now as a coach, I know that. I know these kids have so much going through the routines. I watch these kids' routines. It's amazing, like how much time and energy they put into it. And I'm just a resource, basically. Hey, what do you want to work on today, and why do you want to do that? So that's, I don't know, Mark. Hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, and I'll be even more specific though. We got kids playing high school baseball. They come through high school baseball, and we get them in June, and we see them doing things that are sometimes pretty crazy. And if you ask them, why do you do that? Their answer is, that's what my high school coach wants me to do. And we have a choice. Okay, I can see this is not going to work. Maybe that works at 72 man-hour fastballs. It won't work at 92, what you're doing. And that's where we run into these conflicts where you don't want to be throwing people under the bus, but on the other hand, somebody told them to do something, and it's not going to work for them.
Right.
So that's the conflict.
What's been the craziest thing you've seen, or something you're like, well, I wouldn't teach that at all?
We had a kid last year that he had a super wide stance, and he literally, and I'm sure there was some reason his high school coach had him doing this, maybe to correct another problem, but he was doing this in the game. Super wide stance, had his hands way back, and he literally just went like this. He like spun. He had no load, no timing, no rhythm.
No rhythm and timing.
It was like a drill. You might do that. Christian does a drill, no lower half. But he was kind of like doing that in the game. It looked like a robot.
Right.
And so you look at that and you go, wow. I've never seen a big leaguer ever look like that.
Right.
So it's just a conflict we run into every year.
All the time. Even here at the professional level, they have their own hitting guys, and they come here. I feel like that's such a huge bridge that needs to be built to have some kind of system where guys go in the off season, they work with the same guy all the time. The consistency is important, but obviously that's probably not sustainable. I think. Go ahead, Mark.
I was going to say, we see guys that come out of high school and all they do is pull the ball. Because again, I'm not knocking high school baseball, but the level of competition they're facing, a lot of them, is very different than what we're facing in the summer. So they just go up and yank, because guys are throwing 74-mile-an-hour inside fastballs and they're hitting them 400 feet on the pool side. Then they can't hit a 90-mile-an-hour fastball in the outer third because they never had to do that. And then my worst thing is they say, "Man, I'm really in a slump." I go, "You're not in a slump. You just can't hit that pitch right now. We got to work on the mechanics because you haven't been doing that all year." So that's the kind of stuff we deal with every spring coming out of high school baseball.
Yeah, no, it's a lot of communication because you know what? You never know if that coach told him, the kid that had the wide stance, the coach might have told him that, hey, you still need to gather.
Yeah.
And then you're going to be, your launch position is going to be wider. For whatever reason, he wanted that to happen. But the player probably didn't get all that information because he didn't have the image.
Right.
It's like the analogy that Brett said, it's like driving the boat, but there's no tuber, right? Like you give a kid an image, but you got to have the full image. And I think that's what could be an issue. It can't.
Yeah.
Maybe the kid's not connecting it because he just didn't. He heard one thing and just let the more important thing go.
Right. Very true. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the consistency, building that consistency with the kid.
How about your philosophy? Let me tell you an interesting, real short story. Do you know Corey Eckstein?
Uh-huh. Corey?
Not Dave. David's the one who played,
brother.
right? His brother.
Yeah.
He was a hitting instructor at Kentucky, and we were on a visit. And he says to our recruit, he says, "Let me ask you a question. Do you think Mike Trout's a good hitter?" And the kid looks at him and kind of smiles and said, "Well, it sounds like a trick question, but yeah, he's a good hitter." He goes, "You're right and you're wrong." He pulls up every strike that Mike Trout saw the previous year. He has this chart on this PowerPoint with little dots, thousands of little dots. And he shaves off the top third of the strike zone and he says, "What do you think his batting average is on these strikes?" And the kid says something like, 280. And he goes, "Yeah, right. He wishes. 180. And he goes around the outer third not third, like an inch on the whole plate. And he goes around, he shows us his batting average on those strikes, and they're all in the low 200s, 100s. Then he highlights the middle of the plate, and he says, "Now what do you think his batting average is?" It was like something crazy, like 380 or something. Yeah. And so his whole point of showing us that is, why are we spending so much time trying to teach you to hit pitches, even if they're strikes, marginal strikes, that even the best guys in the world can't hit?
That's right. That's right.
His whole philosophy was, Mike Trout has made his living on hitting mistakes. They're in the middle part of the plate and he doesn't miss them. And the stats back that up. I thought that was fascinating.
That is fascinating. That is right. I mean, I had the same spray chart on mine. Well, not a spray chart, but the dots all over the strike zone. And I think I'm a 350 hitter when I swing at pitches in the zone, or like my hard hit average is way up.
Yeah.
If I could just stay in the zone, but like inches out, just in, if I lose my play discipline, I'm a 220 hitter.
Yeah.
And that's it. It's the small difference of that pitch recognition.
His point was he didn't really spend much time with his hitters hitting marginal pitches. Like, "Hey, I'm going to teach you to hit this pitch an inch off the plate." Like, you're not going to hit it, so we're not going to spend much time. We're going to spend time hitting, maybe fouling them off or something, but you're not going to make your living hitting those pitches. You're out. So, I used to spend a lot of time on teaching kids hitting marginal pitches until he said that, and I'm like, you know what? We're going to learn to hit the mistakes.
Yeah.
Adam, this is way off subject of tonight's call, but have you ever had your eyes checked?
I have.
And are your eyes way better than the average person?
Yeah, that's a great question.
That is a great question. So they weren't.
Really?
So my sophomore year of high school, I figured out that I needed contacts or glasses. And I hit I got called up from sophomore to varsity that year. And I did terrible. I hit 200 something in high school. I got contacts, came back my junior year, 20/20 vision. And I had the best year. I was hitting 400. right? Because I could see the ball, and it was only like just a little bit off, like negative 1.25. My prescription was, but since then I've got LASIK done. But
So, are you familiar with a company called Visual Edge?
yes, they were in Cincinnati.
I love some of the stuff they're doing. They started testing some of our players' eyes. They do these, and we're going to probably partner with them.
That's
because
great.
think about everything we're talking about tonight is right on the money, but it's completely out the window if you can't see.
That's right, 100%.
Right?
You got to be able to pick it up.
So I mean, everything's related. But I remember I used to have such a hard time playing with mile-high pop-ups at night. And I didn't realize it, but I found out later in life that I had a depth perception issue with at night.
Right.
So it kind of explains that. Now, these guys at Visual Edge are talking about you can train that. Like you could have gotten that better, but of course it didn't exist back then. That was in 1902. But yeah, I mean, so
I
anyway,
like Visual Edge. Is that Dr. Seiler?
I can't remember. That sounds familiar.
I remember working with them in Cincinnati.
I'm pretty sure the average major leaguer's eyesight is way better than the average. I read that somewhere, like 2015 or something like that.
Yeah, or we just, most of us just swing hard in case we hit it. Most of the time we got our eyes closed.
You guys are freaks, and you're humble enough not to admit it, but you are. No, there's grinders that make it, but I think some of the even the blast stuff, these guys are always talking about major league numbers, and it's hard for people to get to any major league number, whether it's blast, whether it's Rapsodo, whether it's eyesight. You're talking about the top of the food chain. So.
That's right. What's really cool? I went to that the Texas high school baseball convention out there in Waco.
Oh yeah.
And there's the Win Reality, the all virtual reality stuff.
Oh yeah, I've seen that too.
Track it. You're standing in the batter. You're actually in the batter's box, and you can face any pitcher you want. Well, I
crushed Justin Verlander.
Who doesn't though, Mark? Who doesn't trust Justin Verlander?
No, it's funny. The guy said, "Man, you were right on that." I said, "Yeah, because my brain can still work, but my body doesn't work much anymore."
That's why I stopped playing. Oh man, yeah, but it's really cool though. Win Reality. I got to try it out. It was unbelievable, and they're gonna actually have it. Like we actually could start swinging soon. They're gonna have it so you can actually like get the metrics from where you made contact. It's just unbelievable. And let's talk about the mental side, Justin. Like I'm like, what if they can incorporate like the crowd noise or somebody heckling you or distracting you or like the umpire calling strike in your face, like make it real,
It's coming. Pretty soon we will have to play the game.
And that's what I want to do too. Like there's the player development side and then there's the game. Like you can't there's things in the practice you can't learn in the game because you really got to break it down, or you can't do it. You're not allowed to do it in the game because it happens so fast. And there's stuff in the game you can't. There's no way you can learn in practice.
Yeah, no way.
But what's the bridge? That's man. And that's what I'm passionate about, bridging that gap.